Hey baby, so I'm trying out that OBS software that you recommended. So far, so good. Seems to be working. Uh, what's not working is reading this goddamn article. It's a piece on Mike Pizzullo that was published in Michael West Media on Feb 2024, so this year. But between Philip Dorling and Rex Patrick is that submarine senator guy. Philip Dorling, I've never read, as far as I know, any of his work before, but he's won some awards for journalism and he worked as like a senior policy advisor guy, so he's a bit of a heavy hitter, I guess. But between the two of them, something about their writing style, the way they structure sentences, or maybe just like how many Australian like staff names are in this piece. Uh, just the sheer variety of types of names, I guess. I keep stumbling over them, and it's been a bit of a struggle, so I'm going to give it one last crack. Mike Pizzullo, the demise of Canberra's most powerful, divisive, and yet indestructible bureaucrat. And look at his smug little face. He knows I'm struggling with this article. The not-so-distinguished service of former Secretary of Home Affairs, Mike Pizzullo, ended in a blaze of ignominy, and there may be more coming. Rex Patrick and Philip Dorling with the story. Mike Pizzullo got a gong in the June 2020 Queen's Birthday honours. The then Home Affairs Secretary was made an Officer of the Order of Australia for distinguished service to public administration through leadership roles in the areas of national security, border control, and immigration. Pizzullo joined the Defence Department in 1987 and, over more than 3.5 decades, rose to a position of remarkable prominence in the national security establishment. The Pez, as he was widely known, clawed his way to the top, becoming what one seasoned observer of federal politics described as Canberra's most powerful, divisive, and yet indestructible bureaucrat. Yet in November 2023, Pizzullo was sacked from the top ranks of the Australian Public Service, the APS. The Home Affairs Secretary's termination came within a week of the completion of a report by former APS Commissioner Linnell Briggs, acting as a delegate for current APS Commissioner Gordon de Brouwer, concerning reports about Pizzullo's conduct that had been published by investigative journalists Nick Mackenzie and Michael Bacallard. Bacallard? Bacallard. We'll find out later. Briggs's conclusions were damning. She alleged Pizzullo had repeatedly breached the APS Code of Conduct, used his position as a departmental secretary to gain a benefit or advantage for himself, and failed to maintain confidentiality of sensitive government information. Briggs further alleged Pizzullo failed to act apolitically in his employment, disclosed a conflict of interest, and engaged in gossip and disrespectful critique of ministers and public servants. Briggs's findings were utterly at odds with any notion of distinguished service to public administration. As bureaucratic and political executions go, it was an efficient affair, something that Pizzullo, an immensely experienced bureaucratic operator with a keen sense of history, may well have appreciated. After all, he had once called for the rival Attorney General's department to be put to the sword. Pizzullo would have known his days were numbered as soon as he learned that his highly inflammatory text messages with Liberal Party power broker Scott Briggs, no relative of Linnell Briggs, were in the hands of investigative journalists and would soon be published. His WhatsApp and Signal messages could presumably only be found on electronic devices belonging to two people, Pizzullo himself and his confidant Briggs. In their initial report, Nine Entertainment's Mackenzie and Bacallard were somewhat coy about how they had access to thousands of private messages, saying, "This masthead and 60 Minutes learned of the messages and their content via a third party, who obtained lawful access to them. We reviewed them while investigating Briggs's involvement in a tender process for a failed billion-dollar contract for a new visa processing system from Pizzullo's department." The resultant story, published on the evening of Sunday 24th of September 2023, was a sensational scoop, with Pizzullo revealed to have used Briggs as a clandestine political backchannel to two Liberal Prime Ministers to undermine his political and public service enemies, promote the careers of right-wing politicians he valued as allies in bolstering his home security empire, and to lobby to censor the press, while advocating criminal penalties for journalists who published classified information. Revelation of Puzzulo's highly unorthodox, indeed outrageous secret political manoeuvring immediately rendered his position untenable. The next morning, 25th of September, Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill consulted with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and required Puzzullo to stand aside, albeit on full pay, with a salary package exceeding $900,000 per annum, while she referred the matter to APS Commissioner Gordon de Brouwer for an expedited investigation. Within a day, de Brouwer had appointed former APS Commissioner Lionel Briggs to conduct an inquiry into alleged breaches by Puzzullo of the APS Code of Conduct. Acting Home Affairs Secretary Stephanie Foster told a Senate Estimates hearing in October that this was all a significant shock and lamented the sustained and often distressing media reporting about Puzzullo's alleged misbehaviour and breaches of a professional duty. However, no information was forthcoming on Lionel Briggs's inquiry, with both Foster and APS Commissioner de Brouwer refusing at Estimates to reveal any details. De Brouwer flatly refused to discuss any details of specific allegations, lines of inquiry, projected timeframes, or likely outcomes. Briggs took 2 months to complete her task. Puzzullo was accorded the opportunity to respond to her draft findings and recommendations, and his responses were apparently taken into account in the final report, which was provided to de Brouwer sometime shortly before 23rd of October. Matters then moved very quickly, but before they could be finalised, there was one awkward issue that the government needed to resolve. The Puzzullo clause. Given what had been reported in the media, it was prima facie likely that Puzzullo would be found to have breached the APS Code of Conduct, and termination of his appointment would be recommended. However, in a remarkable omission, the federal government's Remuneration Tribunal's determination of terms and conditions for departmental secretaries had no provision for dealing with a secretary being sacked for breaches of the APS Code of Conduct. As things stood, if Puzzullo was terminated under Section 59, Paragraph 1 of the Public Service Act 1999, he would still be entitled to 12 months of his reference salary, which is $800,000 and a bit, as compensation for early termination of his appointment. While Briggs proceeded to finalise her report, there was a scramble to deal with this potentially politically embarrassing problem. In October, the tribunal, comprised of then-President John Condie and members Heather Sambati and Stephen Conroy, commenced an urgent review of compensation for loss of office by departmental secretaries. Advice was obtained from the Australian government solicitor and the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, and on the 17th of November, just as Briggs was completing her report, the tribunal wrote the departmental secretaries seeking urgent comment on proposed amendments that would remove a secretary's eligibility for compensation if their appointment was terminated after either finding... The tribunal wrote the departmental secretary seeking urgent comment on proposed amendments which would remove a secretary's eligibility for compensation if their appointment was terminated after either a finding by the APS Commissioner that the secretary had breached the APS Code of Conduct, or if the National Anti-Corruption Commission had found the secretary had engaged in corrupt conduct of a serious and systemic nature. 3 secretaries responded, and on the 22nd of November the tribunal wrote again, clarifying the intent of the proposed amendments. The next day, Wednesday 23rd November, the tribunal held a meeting and approved what could be called the Puzzullo clause. There would be no payout. Perhaps coincidentally, or perhaps not, APS Commissioner de Brouwer hand-delivered the Briggs report to Prime Minister Albanese that same day, Wednesday 23rd November. Briggs recommended Puzzullo's termination and de Brouwer concurred. Puzzullo was now on the very fast track for the chop. The Public Service Act provides that before recommending to the Governor-General to terminate a secretary's appointment, the Prime Minister must have a report from the Secretary of the Department of the Prime Minister in Cabinet, the PM&C, prepared in consultation with the APS Commissioner. To that end, de Brouwer provided a copy of Briggs's report to PM&C Secretary Professor Glyn Davis and to Albanese's Chief of Staff, Tim Gartrell. First Assistant Secretary of PM&C's Government Division, Andrew Walter, then rushed to prepare a submission to the Prime Minister and a draft Federal Executive Council paper, circulating a draft to Davis and de Brouwer mid-afternoon on Saturday 25th of November. De Brouwer indicated his concurrence in less than an hour. Davis probably did likewise that evening, and the Prime Minister likely gave his approval sometime on Sunday. Puzzullo's execution came on the morning of Monday, 27th of November, at an Executive Council meeting comprised of Governor-General David Hurley, the Prime Minister, and one other minister. possibly Finance Minister Katie Gallagher, who was also Minister for Public Service, or possibly Home Affairs Minister O'Neill, both having received a copy of the Briggs report. Interestingly, the explanatory memorandum that accompanied Albanese's recommendation to terminate Pezzullo provided no detail other than the briefest of statements that the Home Affairs Secretary had breached the APS Code of Conduct on, quote, numerous occasions, and confirmation that the Public Service Act requirements for termination had been fulfilled. The Governor-General signed, and the Prime Minister countersigned, and Pezzullo's public service career came to an end. Pezzullo's fall was arguably the most dramatic and significant downfall of a departmental secretary in the history of the Australian Federation. Secretaries have been sacked before, and indeed on many occasions, but never before on the grounds of misbehaviour and breach of duty such as those alleged in relation to Pezzullo. The Pez had secured a place in history, though perhaps not the one he had dreamed of when he first joined the Defence Department so long ago. The government was careful to manage the news of Pezzullo's demise while Parliament sat on the 27th of November 2023. Albanese put out a very brief media release confirming the Home Affairs Secretary's sacking and noting that Pezzullo fully cooperated with the inquiry. However, he only did so after Minister O'Neill had finished a press conference on another matter. The APS Commissioner followed with a slightly longer statement that indicated Briggs had found Pezzullo breached the APS Code of Conduct on at least 14 occasions in relation to 5 overarching allegations. However, there were no further revelations. De Brouwer acknowledged it was in the public interest for the overarching breach findings to be made public, but beyond that the public service blinds were pulled down. De Brouwer declared, "No further information regarding the contents of the inquiry will be provided by the Australian Public Service Commission." Not everyone agreed. On the parliamentary crossbenches, there was a strong view that the public interest would be better served by a more fulsome disclosure of the Briggs report. The Albanese government had pledged itself to be more transparent than its predecessor, and this was a test of just how far that commitment would go. 2 days after Pezzullo's demise, Independent Senator David Pocock moved in the Senate that there be laid on the table by the Minister for the Public Service, by no later than 1 p.m. on the 6th of December 2023, the full copy of Miss Linnell Briggs's AO final report, following her recent inquiry into possible breaches of the APS Code of Conduct by Mr. Michael Pezzullo. However, when the motion was put without debate to a vote, Pocock's initiative was defeated by 31 votes to 17. However, when the motion was put without debate to a vote, Pocock's initiative... Oh my god, why is this so clunky? The motion was put to a vote, no debate. Pocock's initiative was defeated 31 votes to 17. The Senate crossbench and Greens were all in favour, while Labour and the Coalition joined forces to keep the Briggs report secret. One might have thought that Prime Minister Albanese and Labour would have seen some political advantage in revealing more of a story, but at least on the face of it... Oh my god, here we go again. One might have thought that Prime Minister Albanese and Labour would have seen some political advantage in revealing more of a story that, at least on the face of it, largely concerned bureaucratic and political machinations during the former coalition governments of Prime Minister Turnbull and Morrison. Yet the Briggs report remains under wraps, neither publicly released nor discreetly leaked as an exclusive to a carefully chosen journalist. In the course of his long career, Pezzullo developed deep links with Labour. In 1993, he joined the staff of then Foreign Minister Gareth Evans and stayed with Evans after Labour's 1996 defeat. In 1997, he became a senior advisor and then a deputy chief of staff to opposition leader Kim Beazley, serving in the latter role until Labour's further defeat in 2001. During that period, Pezzullo first articulated his vision of Home Affairs as a national security super department. Pezzullo returned to the Defence Department in 2002, quickly moving to the top ranks, later heading the Australian Customs and Border Protection Service, and eventually leading his bureaucratic empire of Home Affairs. All the while, he maintained discreet links with Labour, opposition, and government. All the while, however, he maintained discreet links with Labour, while they were in opposition and while they were in government. In their exposé, Mackenzie and Bachelard briefly referred to Pezzullo's links with Labour right-wingers, notably former Senator Stephen Conroy, and his intrigues against Labour figures he saw as a threat to his notional security empire, notably Attorney General Mark Dreyfus. Although the Sydney Morning Herald's primary focus was on Pezzullo's relationship with Liberal operative Scott Briggs, it's quite possible his thousands of texts also shed more light on his relations with Labour figures than had been revealed. At the time of Pizzullo's sacking, Labour insiders worried that the former bureaucratic juggernaut knows where all the bodies are buried. Some wags suggested that the Pez had buried a few of those bureaucratic and political bodies himself. Yet so far, Pizzullo has maintained a disciplined silence. Perhaps he is waiting to see whether further developments are yet to play out. On the 27th of November 2023, the day of Pizzullo's demise, we lodged a Freedom of Information application with the Australian Public Service Commission seeking access to the Briggs Inquiry Report and any related correspondence from Commissioner de Brouwer to the Prime Minister. This seemed not an unreasonable request in the public interest, and it's significant that Australia's Freedom of Information laws override the secrecy provisions of the Public Service Act as related to the Code of Conduct investigations. After much delay, the Commission has released a heavily redacted copy of de Brouwer's letter of transmittal to Albanese. The Commission flatly refused to release the Briggs report, not one paragraph, not one word. The reasons include claims that the Briggs report contains information received in confidence, as well as legal advice obtained by the government from an external law firm. It is also asserted that the Briggs report includes information that, if disclosed, would or could reasonably be expected to cause damage to the security, defence, or international relations of the Commonwealth. And they've got a scan here of their letter regarding their inquiry. Sorry, the letter of transmittal. That's been redacted to hell. Oh, just a one-page letter, I guess. Unless they're only giving us the first page. However, and perhaps most significantly, the Public Service Commission has also claimed exemption from disclosure of information that, quote, if revealed, could prejudice the conduct of a law enforcement investigation, end quote. The Commission's Freedom of Information decision-maker has stated, I'm satisfied that disclosure of the Briggs report could reasonably be expected to prejudice the conduct of future investigations and other processes in a particular case. Accordingly, I find that the report is exempt. It remains to be seen whether these exemptions from transparency will hold up under review, at least as far as the entirety of the Briggs report is concerned. Meantime, however, it appears that the matter of Michael Pizzullo may not be fully resolved. Just what the future law enforcement or other investigation might be involved can only be a matter of speculation. Oh my god, okay. Just what future law enforcement or other investigation might be involved can only be a matter of speculation, though it is of note that the published findings of the Briggs report include a finding that Pizzullo, quote, failed to disclose a conflict of interest. It's also notable that Pizzullo was found to have, quote, failed to maintain confidentiality of sensitive government information. This in itself is quite remarkable, given that Pizzullo held the highest levels of security clearances, including access to the most sensitive intelligence information, for well over 3 decades. He was undoubtedly fully aware of his obligations to safeguard confidential government information. He was a strident advocate for draconian action against public servants who breached those obligations, and also against journalists who published security classified information. Australia's secrecy laws have been greatly strengthened over the past 2 decades, in part due to the bureaucratic and political advocacy of the former Home Affairs Secretary. As for what, if anything, might happen next, it would not be appropriate to speculate. However, the disclosure that there may be future law enforcement action and other processes in relation to a particular case is unlikely to be welcome news to the Pez. Meantime, he's still an officer of the Order of Australia. That too is some unfinished business. Okay, I don't know. I mean, I got through the first half of that pretty smooth because I've done it like 4 or 5 times now. But there's some stuff here that's just fucking clunky. And that end, I think there's at least one typo here where they talk about disclose a conflict of interest. Like, was it Briggs disclosing a conflict of interest, or are they talking about Pizzullo's failure to disclose a conflict of interest? Like, I mean, this is, Michael West Media is an independent setup. I don't expect that they have, like, really rigorous editing going on. But as a layperson, that was kind of frustrating. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to recap some of this in a way that makes more sense to me, in case you also struggle to follow along, and maybe do a little Googling while we're at it. So this guy, Queen's Birthday Honours Officer of the Order of Australia, obviously doesn't deserve it now that he's had to be booted in such a disgraceful way that they've had to add a clause to their contracts because of him, that you cannot get a full payout if you're terminated for being fucking treasonous. But yeah, no, still got his medal. Gossip and disrespectful critique of ministers and public servants, I'm not surprised by, but this idea that he's deliberately... what's the thing? Well, the first red flag was that in the last couple of days he's been involved in national security, border control, and immigration. Like, border control and immigration has been some fucking dog whistly bullshit in this country. So the chances that he was a good guy were pretty low to start with. But his position wasn't aligned with an agenda. It was,
as bureaucratic and
departmental secretary was supposed to be apolitical, right? So his APS role, that's one of his breaches, was that he was being partisan. These two who leaked his text messages, by the way, one of them is known to me. So it says Michael Bachelard and Nick McKenzie. Nick McKenzie did that deep dive into Australian neo-Nazis. Like, really good work. I had no idea he was associated with Nine, and that reflects really well on Nine. I didn't know they still did good reporting, of if they ever did. So, new visa processing system. That's especially with the stuff that's come out about how Morrison was scamming or allowing scams to do with Anaru and detention contracts to happen while he was in office. I wonder how bullshit this $1 billion visa processing system was, but I'm not going to dig into that. Back service, clandestine political back channels to two Liberal Prime Ministers to undermine his political and public service enemies, which just like... he just like... public service enemies makes me feel like, desk secretaries having like long-going feuds against one another, but instead of just fighting over who brings in what good shit to potluck, he's actually getting people canned or promoting the careers of right-wing politicians he valued as allies in bolstering his home security empire. Like, this
revelation of Pezzulo's highly...
That's fucking crazy. Like, secret political maneuvering. He's on just short of $1 million a year. I mean, just short. It's too much money. It's crazy. And when the Remuneration Tribunal has a look at their terms and conditions, they find out that they never anticipated needing to sack a secretary in disgrace for severe breaches of the APS Code of Conduct. It's really good that they have that clause in now, but it's also annoying as hell that he was put on pause or put on the timeout bench for 2 months collecting that kind of almost $1 million salary during that period. And like, his assets haven't been seized or anything. Like, how much would he have made and taken advantage of? And like, how much property does he own? I bet he's a fucking landlord. Let's find out, All caps, Pezzulo assets. Let's have a scroll through Wiki first, see if we can find anything useful. Life and education, career. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that early in 2014, Pezzulo's brother, Fabio, escaped a criminal conviction after he confessed to lying to an inquiry investigating corruption at Sydney Airport. Fabio Pezzulo, a former customs officer, was fined and placed on a 2-year good behaviour bond for perjuring himself before a corruption watchdog. 42-year-old was charged after an investigation over allegations he stole prescription drugs to fellow Sydney Airport customs officers and lied to the Australian Commission for Law Enforcement Integrity. While the case was underway, Michael Pizzullo was fulfilling senior executive roles in Customs and Border Protection, but had disclosed the conflict to his minister from the outset. In a note to staff regarding the case, he was reported to have said, "From the outset, I asked and expected to be treated as a detached family member with no official rights, interests, or powers in the matter." WhatsApp messages scandal. Oh. Partisan interventions during the 2018 Liberal Party of Australia leadership spills. But, like, is he a fucking landlord? He's married to an economist. Oh, that's another fucking... yeah. I bet you he is. I bet he has crazy fucking assets. But, I mean, and you're 4 kids. If you send them all to like a $50,000 per year private school, maybe you don't have too much for actually living on. But if you're engaging in corruption and these other affairs, like, what are we supposed to expect for your other shit, you know? Mike Pizzullo has for weeks maintained a disciplined silence, and his next moves are not clear, but those close to the former secretary say he maintains he's done nothing to warrant his immediate dismissal. Okay, that's just a massive ego, which does that surprise anybody? For the hardheads inside Labour, Pizzullo's presence had often been seen as an uncomfortable necessity, a force of nature who could help keep doubts about the party's handling of national security off the front pages of newspapers. Now those same Labour figures wait nervously to see whether he unleashes against his former political masters. They appreciate all too well. The Canberra veteran knows where all the bodies are buried. So this was posted November 2023 in ABC News. Oh. Sydney Morning Herald. Home Affairs looking into 6-figure shareholding of senior bureaucrat. This was also February 2024. Oh, Michael Bacalard and Nick McKenzie. I don't have a subscription, and I don't want a subscription. Maybe someone's archived it. Damn, that's a shame. Did I... Oh yeah, Nick McKenzie and Joel Tozer. It's a very short summary. I should probably look up how to properly pronounce all these names, hey? See, this makes Labour look pretty shit. Unless they come out with these legal processes having been further investigations into Pizzullo's shit, and then they release all of his nonsense. I would be interested in reading that. But it looks like there hasn't been a huge amount of news published on him since. Since February of this year. Yeah, 2023. Oh, to be stripped of Order of Australia. Sky News. Fuck those guys. 2023. Yeah, I mean, there's been such a sharp rise in corruption in Australia. I feel like since we had a pretty good standing in 2007, if I remember the OECD comparison index. Is it the OECD? Maybe not. Let's see what these guys have. Transparency International. Wait. Yeah. Yeah, does this let us sort? Yeah, so 2023, Australia, what rank is Australia? 75 out of 100, rank 14 out of 180. Score hasn't changed since last year. So we're getting into the orange, where yellow is positive in terms of corruption. We're considered passingly corrupt, I guess. Like, there's definitely corruption going on. It's there, it's visible, but we're not notoriously or... I mean... No, I won't... I don't know for sure. I'm not familiar with his index, but if we're ranked... Our score is 75 out of 100, where 100 is being above board. So let's have a look at where we were in 2007. Corruption perceptions. So we were considered, like, not corrupt at all in fucking 2007. That's such a bright yellow. And then 2016, yeah, we were 79, so a little bit more corrupt than we're considered now. 2020, 77. Okay, so this year, starting around 2022, so 2022, 2023, we hit 75, and that's an improvement. We've actually got some ground on other people, but I'd be interested to see how we compare with, like, other OECD countries. That's not an index, that's just... Oh yes, so I opened this a couple of minutes ago and got distracted, especially because I wanted to see if anybody else had written about it. But no, apparently Sky News on the first 2 pages of results were the only people talking about Mike Pizzulo being stripped of the Order of Australia. The distinguished public servant was sacked by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for sending text messages to a Liberal lobbyist and friend of former Prime Ministers Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison. There was no corruption or criminality involved, yet procedural steps are underway to strip Mr. Pizzulo of his Order of Australia. That is a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Like, he violated the APS Code of Conduct across at least 5 different principles, and repeatedly. I would say backdoor lobbying and having a political agenda in a position that's supposed to be apolitical is pretty fucking shit. The idea that it's not corrupt or criminal is... I mean, that's a claim. I don't know that you can back it. I don't know what kind of argument anyone would make to defend that, but they've said it. Sky News. An award can be removed if, in the opinion of the Governor-General, a person has behaved or acted in a manner that has brought disrepute on the order. Yeah, like, I would agree. Since the inception of Australia's honours system, at least 46 people have been stripped of awards, the vast majority for criminal or civil convictions. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott told Sky News on Thursday Mr. Pizzullo was an outstanding public servant who worked for governments of both persuasions with energy and commitment. Yes, well. From stopping the boats to establishing the Australian Border Force. I mean, I personally think those were both fucked up things to do. Wow, I didn't know people were going on the record saying deranged stuff like this. That's really interesting. I would like people to, I mean, I don't think that he worked for Gareth Evans in the 90s is being debated by anybody, but since I don't know a great deal about old farts like this, I would love a little bit of linking, you know, a couple scans of his CV, anything like that. Like later on in this article, they said he did nothing corrupt or nothing criminal, and now they're saying, you know, they're rehashing that his text messages breached the public service codes through his position, using his position to gain a benefit for himself, failing to be apolitical, engaging in disrespectful critique. And they're making the argument that the personal benefit that he derived was that he had personal communications with senior leadership that was not available to other secretaries. Even if that was the only thing, it's already showing like a pretty questionable judgment for someone in that position. And what is the point of having personal communication channels and personal relationships with senior leadership who are making those political decisions, especially if you're sharing yours? It's on its own, that would be questionable, and they haven't in any way rebutted these other claims that were made when he was sacked. David Hurley's getting replaced, right? We're getting a new Governor General. If I remember correctly, she's like this blonde landlord. Yeah, Samantha Mostyn. Prominent businesswoman and gender equality advocate Samantha Mostyn. Alright, well, I hope we've got records on how she pays women versus men. Like, it's white ladies in the gender equality space. That's so cool. She's already been appointed. Conclude his appointment. So 1st of July this year. So David Hurley's still in there. I wonder if he made a decision then. Oh, Canberra Times, here we go. Oh, you gotta subscribe. Former Home Affairs Secretary Michael Pizzullo is set to be stripped of his Order of Australia, March 29, 2024. So that might be locked in. Oh my goodness. Alright, never mind. What I really wanted to know was what his assets looked like and what kind of backdoor shit he managed to do with his $1 million a year salary, but whatever. Corruption rank by country. Yeah, here's what I wanted. So in the world, Australia ranked 14 on December 23. No, we ranked 13, so we've improved. We were previously 14. Does it show our other years? 2012 we were ranked 7th in the world, and we had a real low in 2021. We dropped to 18th place, which we had Morrison in charge, so that's not shocking at all. I mean, the dumb shit he did with COVID and the vaccines was insane. We were 13 in 2022, and we've dropped again to 14th place this year. That's interesting. So I misread that other scale completely. 2012 was our best ranking for corruption. That's interesting. Like, my aunties in Thailand once asked about Australia's corruption in general, because there's just this expectation that with Thailand things will be slow and stuff will get skimmed off the top, basically at every level. But and she had this perception that Australia was like had a lot of public service integrity, but not really. I mean, I thought we were perpetually in this zone of being in the top 10 for bureaucratic or government integrity, but I'm not surprised that it's climbed. I mean, that corruption has climbed. I'm surprised that it used to wave like this. Oh, we were top 10 in 1995 too. I would love to see the little Prime Minister's heads pop up above this. That'd be fun. So this is, who is this? Trading Economics. I mean, the fact that they're collecting this information in the first place gives them a degree of legitimacy in my eyes, but where are you getting this information from, please? Australia is the 14th least corrupt nation out of 180 countries, according to the 2023 Corruption Perceptions Index reported by Transparency International. Corruption rank in Australia averaged 10.66 from 1995 until 2023, so that's like the mean average, though. I'd be interested in what the mode... I mean, the mode is probably 13, right? Reaching an all-time high of 18 in 2021 and a record low of 7 in 1995. Misleading, because we also had that in 2012. And we were looking at Transparency International before. They seemed dedicated to just that one thing, and they were a .org, so I would say they're pretty credible, but I also want to know how they get their information. We hold the powerful and corrupt to account by exposing the systems and networks that enable corruption. We advocate for policies and build coalitions to change the status quo. Advocacy, priorities, political integrity, dirty money, corruption perceptions index. Anti-corruption conference, anti-corruption awards. Yes, I would like to know how you do what you do. Report corruption. Corruption area A to Z. Tax evasion, tax haven, transparency, solicitation. So I guess they just gather reports on these things from the companies, and then they have they do a bunch of networking that ensures that they continue to get a good amount of that information. I would have to read a lot more on this. Maybe that's something for another day. I'll add it to my reading list. Alright, baby, I've talked your ear off. Maybe not the best choice of an article to read this time, but, you know, we had to get our info from somewhere. Alright, love you, bye.